Namaste. The Christ in me bows before the Christ in each one of you. Welcome to another video in this series of integrating the sacred. And what we do is we reflect on a certain gospel passage, try to break it open, and see what it has to teach us, to see how it can open us up again to that light and love of God so that we can live a divine life. So I'm going to jump right into the gospel today. And it's about a woman who was hemorrhaging blood for over 12 years. Now, we know that there is no life without blood. What that means is that this woman was dying a slow death. And we're told that she spent all of her money, all of her savings on doctors, and they weren't able to heal her. And then she hears about Christ, and she hears that he was a great healer. So she goes to him, but he's surrounded by a crowd, and they're pressing on him. But she says to herself, if I can just break through the crowd and touch the hem of his garment, I know I can be healed. So that's what she did. She pushed through. She touched the hem of his garment, and she was instantly healed. Now, Jesus didn't see her, but he said to his disciples, who touched me? They said, we don't know who touched you. It's the big crowd. They're pressing in on you. We don't know. And he said, no, somebody touched me. Because, I want you to hear this, I felt the power leave me. I felt the power leave me. The woman then comes before him. She drops to her knees. She explains what happened. And he says to her, my daughter, such sweetness, such love. Your faith has healed you. Go in peace. Beautiful story. But what I want to underscore is that this story is not just about her. It's about you and me. It's about the human race in general. Is it not true that some of us need physical healing? Isn't it true that some of us need emotional healing from past trauma? Isn't it true that some of us need healing from depression and anxiety? Some of us need healing from hopelessness and despair. Some of us need healing from a broken heart. At some level, we're all in need of healing. So before I go into the details of this story, let me just say how healing works. Essentially, we are energy. We are embodied energy. And the quality of our physical lives, our emotional lives, our mental lives, and our spiritual lives depend entirely on the quality of the energy that we are absorbing. They've done studies. They've taken people who were mentally ill, and they put them in a community, in a family of healthy, functioning people. And even without any therapy, over a period of time, those people began to function, those people with a mental illness began to function in a better and a higher way. Why? They entered into the health of the community that they were a part of, the healthy energy, and that energy uplifted them. When we eat fresh vegetables, there's a kind of powerful, pure energy in those fresh vegetables, particularly if they're organic, that help the body to function in a better way. When we're around loving people everything about us is better. In fact, they've done studies when people spend time in a very loving community, like on a retreat or maybe in a monastery or an ashram, their immune systems are stronger. Their bodies are stronger. Their minds are stronger. See, our wholeness and any subsequent healing we need, again, is dependent on the energy that we are receiving and bringing into ourselves. That's why Yogananda said that environment trumps willpower. If we're in a loving, positive, energetic context, environment, it's much easier to be healthy, to be whole, to be loving, to be happy. All right. So what does this have to do with Jesus and his healing and us? Remember, Jesus is not merely a wise man. He wasn't merely a teacher of the law. He was, and still is, a force field. And I don't mean this as a metaphor. He was and is a force field for the highest and purest love that we can imagine in time and space. He was a perfect embodiment, and still is, of the highest and purest divine light and divine energy. He was and is a force field for healing, for wholeness, for the resurrection of our deepest and most soulful dreams. So when this woman came into the force field of Jesus with an open heart, that's a very important thing. Her eyes were open to who Jesus was, and her heart was open. She just touched the hem of his garment, and that energy, that power flowed that transformed her nervous system, her immune system, her DNA, and brought her into wholeness. Now again, what was true for that lady, that woman, can be true for all of us. Let me share with you a story that the great psychologist Carl Jung tells, and he heard it from an anthropologist who saw it firsthand. This was before the communist revolution in China, and this anthropologist was in China. And there was a severe drought in the area that he was living in, and it really threatened the lives of people because it threatened their crops. And when they were sort of at a heightened state of desperation, they brought in this holy man from another region who supposedly was able to make it rain. And what he did, he went into, we'll say, a hut or maybe a cave for 2 weeks. And then he came out and it started to rain. And they said, "How did you do that?" And he said, "It's really not very complicated." He said, "I came here and I felt the disorder in the lives of people. I felt the disorder and the collective consciousness of the people. So what did I do? I went into my cave and I just meditated. I focused on the love and the light of God. And that brought order back, and it brought harmony back, and the rains came." That's how healing works. We put ourselves in the presence of God's light and love. We enter into the force field of Jesus. If you practice Kriya Yoga, you enter into the force field of Babaji. And over time, sometimes instantaneously, but usually it's over time, the quality of our physical health, quality of our emotional health, our intellectual health, and our spiritual health improves, because we are leaving a force field that was less than ideal and entering into a force field of divine energy and love that slowly but surely heals us, transforms us, and elevates us. So what I want to talk about now is, how do we integrate that on a practical level in our lives? I want to go back to the woman in the story. before she met Jesus, first of all, she knew that she needed healing. And she had exhausted every logical, reasonable way of getting to that healing, and nothing worked. And then she listened to her intuition. She listened to her soul. If you want to say, she listened to her conscience. And that conscience moved her, that intuition moved her in the presence, in the direction of Jesus. What does that mean for us? Through prayer, meditation, through silence, we have to trust that still small voice inside of us, our conscience. And that still small voice will slowly but surely lead us in the right direction. I'll share a story that a friend shared with me recently. He had a history of dysfunctional relationships, romantic relationships. And he realized he needed help. So he began to meditate. He began to embrace a spiritual path. And he said this intuition, this clarity came into his mind of the kind of woman that was good for him, the kind of woman that it would be good to have as a spouse. He said, it took a little time, but I listened to my intuition. I listened to that interior voice. I dated a few women. They were almost right, not quite right. And then he met the right woman. And they have a very loving and healthy relationship. So we have to listen to that still small voice, that spark of the divine. Again, you can call it conscience. And it will always lead us towards the force field of God's love and light. The second thing is we have to pray. We have to meditate. And we don't pray to find God, because we live and we move and we have our being in God. But every time we pray and every time we meditate, we open ourselves up to this force field of divine energy and divine healing. And again, the healing that we long for may not happen instantaneously, but it will happen over time. When I teach people to meditate, they will say, they'll come back 3 or 4 months later and they say, I don't know if the meditation is working because I'm not having these grand experiences. And I say to them, how's your life going? Well, my life's going better. Are you more peaceful? Yeah, I am. Are you more skilled at handling life's problems? Yes, I am. Then it's working. So we don't always see in an obvious way how this divine force field of love is working, but it's always working. But we have to commit ourselves to a practice of deep contemplative prayer and meditation. And really the goal is just to touch in a deeper and deeper way that force field of divine energy, to allow God's grace to pull us into that force field at deeper and deeper levels. And slowly but surely, it begins to transform our lives. Now, I want to be realistic. Sometimes, for example, we don't get the physical healing that we want. But there's a different kind of healing that can happen where we know God's love. We are touching it. We trust it. And so even if we go through a period of, again, physical illness, or even if we're approaching our own physical deaths, if we are operating consciously in that force field of love, we can have peace in the midst of that. That is a form of healing. The last piece of practice that I want to recommend to you has to do with the imagination. Now, we have a passive kind of imagination that gets taken over by this instinct, this stimulation, and then we run with it with our imagination. But there's a spiritual kind of imagination. Let me quote Yogananda in this context, or paraphrase him. He said that Jesus and the force field of Jesus' love that emanates through him is still very available to the human family. So what we have to learn to do is use our spiritual imagination to enter into the force field of Jesus' love. So what does that look like? Well, when you're praying and meditating, imagine that Jesus is next to you, because he is. As you move through your day, you're driving in your car, rather than listening to nonsense on the radio, imagine that Jesus is driving with you in the car, because he is. Talk to him as though he is sitting next to you, because he is. When you find yourself in a difficult situation and you don't know what to do, imagine Jesus, image Jesus, talk to him. He will respond to you. He will pull you into that force field of divine love and divine intuition, which will lead you however you need to be led. It will bring you healing. Spiritual imagination is not making something up, but it's using our imagination to create a portal, an opening into the love, the force field of Jesus' love and energy. And if you're a Kriyaban, it works the same way with Yogananda. I often feel Yogananda's presence as I move through the day. And just thinking about him and thinking about Jesus, I can feel it pulling me into that force field of divine love. Let me close with this thought. We're meant to live a divine life here and now. And we just have to follow the pattern of this wonderful woman in the gospel story. We have to listen to the intuition as it draws us to the light, as it draws us into the force field of God's love. We have to take a risk like she took a risk. We have to pray. We have to meditate. We have to use our imagination. But if we do that, I guarantee you over time, that force field will become the dynamic energy guiding your life, and you will experience healing on every level. Okay? God bless you. If you like this video, please give it a like. All right? If you like it, pass it on to a friend. God bless you.